Just wait for the audience. Just wait for the audience to arrive.
Hello. How are you?
Thank you.
I'm Dave Lambert.
Yeah.
Internet 2. Good. We're close to the line. I have to get my slides up, do I?
You can share the mic.
I think from the stand
Oh, I'm right in the middle.
Yes.
We have got to get more women.
I know. Well, I
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Karel Vic. I'm the Secretary General of Terena, and I will be introducing this session, this panel discussion to you. We are going to talk about the future of NRENs, National Research and Education Networks. You have seen all over the place the Terena logo in a slightly different version because it has 25 years attached to it. This year is the year that we celebrate the 25th anniversary of Terena. And that also means that many of the NRENs in Europe are 25 years old. A few started earlier in Norway, in the United Kingdom maybe, but many of them started around the year 84, 85, 86. And why were NRENs created? Well, because there was this beautiful new invention that we would now call the internet, but wasn't called the internet at that time. You could connect computers to one another, they could talk to one another. And not only an IBM computer talking to an IBM computer or a digital computer talking to a digital computer, but you could have computers of different makes talking to each other. And not only computers owned by physicists talking to other computers owned by physicists, or computers owned by astronomers talking to other computers owned by astronomers. No, computers of anybody in the research and education world could talk to each other. And you could organize that at the national level. This all seems pretty obvious now, but this was quite revolutionary in the 1980s. And many of the people involved at that time foresaw that this thing, let me call it the internet, even though that's not historically correct, that this internet thing would grow big and that it would connect more than just researchers in the world. And that it was a new form of communication. And we knew about forms of communication. We had companies that dealt with that. They were called PTTs. I was in a meeting last week with one of my younger colleagues who didn't know the word PTT, and there may be also people in their 20s or in their 30s in the room here, so maybe I should explain. PTT didn't stand for push to talk, it stood for Post, Telegraph and Telecom. And those were monopoly companies owned by the state, and they provided what I just said. They provided telephone. Telephone was not the sort of thing that you hold in your hand and has a screen when you walk through the street and you take pictures with it. No, telephone were rather clumsy things that were found in most homes and companies, and they were attached to a wire, and they were black because the PTTs had convinced the population that for security reasons all telephones needed to be black. And they also took care of telegram. That's even more difficult to explain. Basically, a telegram was a sort of email that was printed out and then delivered by a person to your house. And they also did telex. Anybody remember telex? Well, yes, there are a few people who remember telex. It was sort of telegram, but then the machine that it came out of was actually in your office and nobody had to deliver it to your doorstep. And they did post, and I think post still exists in the most countries, even though postal delivery is a lot slower than it used to be in those days. Anyway, those companies took care of forms of communication. Internet was a new form of communication, and we thought these PTTs would take care of that as well. But for some strange reason, they were not so interested. So NRENs were sort of created as a stopgap solution. We would have NRENs for about 5 years, and then around 1990, the PTTs would take over and run this for us like any other service. But that didn't happen. Commercial internet grew, but there was still a niche market for NRENs because the sort of connections that researchers and educators require are different from what people at home require. But that may now also be changing, and NRENs got into other things, services on top of the network and what have you. But the world is still changing further, and is there still a reason for existence of NRENs? What is the future of NRENs? What will NRENs look like 10 years from now? Everybody's talking about the year 2020, which is actually only 9 years from now, and committees are set up to study that, and many NRENs have developed strategic visions on that. That is the sort of thing that we are going to discuss in this panel session. and we have collected a panel of people from different countries who have devoted some thought about that. And I'd like to introduce them. First of all, I'd like to introduce my co-chair, who is easily recognizable because it's the only lady at the table. Shame on us. Anna Hunsinger will be co-chairing this session with me. And then we have our panelists, starting with me and then moving further along. Claudio Locchio from Italy, Dave Lambert from Internet2 in the United States, Martin Beck from Denmark, Tim Marshall from the United Kingdom, Jan Groenterath from the Czech Republic, and Thomas Brunner from Switzerland. They are all in managerial positions in their own NREN and have ideas about this topic. The way we will organize this session is as follows. I have asked all of our 6 panelists to prepare a 5-minute statement about what their vision is, what their own NREN, or maybe the NREN scene in general, will look like 10 years from now. So they will come over here one by one, do their 5-minute statement, and after that we will have an hour left for discussion, and I hope to get many questions and comments from the audience in that discussion session. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to, for the first introduction, to Dave Lambert, CEO and President of Internet2, who may go first, not only because he's the only one who is not from Europe, but he also took up his position less than a year ago, so he's sort of the new kid on the block. Welcome to the Terrainer conference. Dave. Why don't you come over here?
We want to work.
You can push forwards on the green button.
Okay.
But you have
Aha.
to hold the mic.
On the green button. First of all, I thank you very much for the invitation to be on this panel. Certainly a very, very timely topic. I have to say the topic of trying to project 10 years scares me. But as I thought about it, I reflected further on it and think that let me make a proposition. If any of us are able to tell you where NRENs are going to be 10 years from now, then we as a community have failed in our role as transformational leaders. And so our job, the job of NRENs is to be ahead of where the internet is, to foster this extraordinary transformational community of people that exist around the research and education community, and to do the things that fundamentally change how the future is defined. I want to just make a couple of quick comments here. And then get out of the way as we think about as I came into the role of CEO of Internet2, my first sort of goal, I think, was to make sure I understood what it was that Internet2's member owners are facing, both in terms of challenges and opportunities. Unlike many other NRENs, Internet2 is actually owned by, not funded by the government, not a roll-up of what we call our regional networks in the U.S., but is actually owned by the very intensive research institutions in the United States, about 225 of those. And so as we think about our future direction, that's where we focus. And as I looked at that community, I saw 6 major challenges that our community was focusing on, that our members were focusing on, that for us to find our strategy, it was important that we understood. Number 1 was globalization and the extraordinary impact of science and education, on science and education right now, of this developing global model. Research is global, education is global. We provide the infrastructure for that. We have to think about it in global terms. The nature of science that is changing from single investigator science to large-scale distributed science represents an extraordinary driver for what we have to be prepared to do. We're confronted with other things, and perhaps some of these are unique to the United States. But as I think about it, I really don't think so. You're just, in Europe, facing some of these issues in different ways. The rapidly increasing cost of education and the impact that that is having on the long-standing commitment we have in Western governments to assuring that we provide free and open education to our citizens. We use many models to do that. The simple fact of the matter is we're quickly pricing the cost of what we do out of the reach of many of the citizens in our country. And in that context, then, this whole notion of education has changed radically. It's now not a matter of what you learn in 4 years at a university or in a graduate school. The world we work in changes so rapidly that we have to transform our learning quickly. And we're doing that in a changing competitive landscape where we see all these entrants of commercial education providers into the marketplace in the U.S. I think we're beginning to see that in Europe. And, you know, we need to be able to understand how to bring them into this ecosystem. And because technology has become so critical, we're facing what I call risk management issues we've never faced before. That is, now that technology is what our institutions run on, we can't afford a failure in technology. And as entities that are responsible for providing infrastructure, we have to step up to that. So in that context, I think, we worked in Internet 2 across our membership community to sort of say, okay, now, at least for the next, I can't bet on 10 years. I'll bet on the next 2 to 5 years. The 7 primary areas that we needed to focus on. And I'll run down through these very quickly. I think you'll probably hear these a lot today, not just from me, but from others. We were put in place initially to do networking. And advanced networking and network services leadership is sort of our anchor business, and one that we have to stay focused on. But it's scary right now. We've been essentially 40 years in a stable TCP/IP-based technology environment that just by the definition of change will radically transform relatively quickly. We see new architectures like OpenFlow and new capabilities coming in the marketplace that we have to provide leadership on. The biggest pressure I hear from our members, from the CIOs at our universities, however, is it's not really about the network any longer. The network is only an enabler to the things you need to do above the network. And providing above the network services like federations and cloud services, video conferencing services, being able to turn these things into service products is, I think, essential to our ability to be seen as critical service providers for our member community, certainly in the United States. Another big focus for us is the broadening of our mission. We call that in our slide, US UCAN. You probably don't know what that means. That stands for US Unified Community Anchor Network. And this is related to a commitment that Internet 2 has taken on, and I know many of the other NRENs have, to extend the benefits of our broadband ubiquitous networking environment to other public service providing organizations like public schools, public libraries, state and local governments in the US. And in fact, we just at Internet 2 received our first significant government investment in our Internet 2 infrastructure with the quid pro quo that we connect up to an additional 200,000 of these community anchors to our network. In all of our systems, in the U.S., though, in all of our systems, in both the U.S. and in Europe, it's important for us to remember that NRENs don't provide our service by ourselves. We're a part of a complicated ecosystem that starts at the campus level. It goes up to some aggregation above the campus, that goes up in the U.S. to regional networks, and in Europe to national networks, and then goes up in the U.S. to Internet 2, and in Europe to GEONT. And then we have to connect that whole global fabric. The relationships between these layers of the ecosystem are crucial to us and our future. And the way we manage those is crucial to us. So it's a priority for us. I talked a little bit about global reach. The simple fact of the matter is our research, in particular the research that goes on between Europe and the United States and Canada across the North Atlantic isn't just collaborative research. If we were a business, we would probably say that our research enterprises in the US and Europe have merged. They're organized jointly, they're funded jointly, and the kind of support they need needs to be support that is done in a coherent way across the two continents. Obviously, the leading edge customers for us are the research community. It is in the research community where the innovation drivers are. We call the research community our anchor store, much like, you know, the shopping mall. You know, it's the store, it's the place where that drives the real innovation of what we do. And then the last one, and I'll get out of here, is, and turn it over to others, is focusing on the critical role that industry plays in this. We really can't advance our goals here unless we are able to develop the right kind of partnerships with industry. And that means that we depend on them for building the equipment and the applications that we need to provide our services most often. But we also need to have the kind of relationships where they learn to depend on us for where the hockey puck, as they say, is going to be 5 years or more from now. So nurturing this relationship with industry is also a big focus. These things may not define where we're going to be in 10 years, but they set the model for where we're going to be 10 years. I would just make one other comment on parting, and that is to pick up on something Carl said. Remind you the PTT. We call those things incumbent carriers in the United States. And I have to say that 20, 25 years ago when we started this, if you look at the leadership that did this, much of their energy came from one common unifying conviction. And that was that the PTTs and the incumbent carriers did not bring us a business model and a technology platform that was relevant to us. 25 years into this, the last thing we can afford to do is start behaving like they did. And that's a real risk. We have to keep focused on the next model. We have to stay focused on innovation. We have to do it in a financially stable way, but we can't fall into those same traps that we spent so many years funding. So that said, my comments.
Thank you, Dave. Can I ask Tim Marshall to move over there and give us his 5-minute summary of his vision on the future?
I did a deal with Dave Carroll. I said, whatever he does, I'll do a minute more. No, let me pick up on Dave. Dave said, if we were a business. I want to propose we are a business. And what I want to just take us through very quickly is the sort of characteristics that I think will be required of an NREN going forward. If I knew 10 years ahead, I probably wouldn't be here. But I want to talk about some of the things, the changes that might have to happen to us as organizations. I'm assuming I pressed the green thing, do I, Carol? The big green thing. The big green thing. There you go. So really just going through it, let me come to one thing first of all that I've already heard of a theme here. There we go. Are we just in the fiber business? Are we in the pipes business because some people are getting a little tedious of that, or are we in more? I want to suggest to you, although Janet is a lady's name, I want to suggest to you that NRENs need to change their gender from male to female. The males are always bragging about size, and how many people are bragging about who's first to 100 gigs. I think we need to move across to the female gender, which is much more about cleverness, smartness, multi-processing, and all those other good things. As NRENs, I think we are going beyond just networking. Another thing that we need to be is a sustainable organization, a sustainable business, and that's in two senses. One of the biggest challenges to Janet, and I think the challenges to many of you at the moment, is how do you build a sustainable financial model for the next 10 years? And I know with our colleagues at the JISC at the moment, we are going through how we face up to those issues. Can money come from the top anymore, or do institutions have to make more of a contribution? Should it be under the way of paying for services, or should it be licenses? What should it be? Sustainable businesses are one of the biggest challenges for the next 10 years. One of the biggest issues we see in the UK is, does there come a tipping point where you go beyond that money that's made available by government, where people then want to go and do their own things, and you break up one of the very essential things to me of an NREN, which is the universality, the fact that everyone gets that provision, everyone has the opportunity to collaborate. And then, of course, the other area of sustainability is the world we live in, and we need to be adaptable and responsive to that. Those of you that heard Jim Rogers on BBC World this morning will hear how he was talking about all the impending disasters and the way he's arranging his financial portfolio to meet that. Also, a piece came out this week from Bill Santanu about adaptability. We are going to have to think more and more in the coming years about how our networks, how our facilities and our services are adaptable and responsive to some of the natural and man-made disasters that are going to come our way, whether it be a shortage of power or whether it be flooding. And if you want to know about flooding, go and talk to our colleagues from Australia. They will tell you about the need to be adaptable in that response. So a sustainable business, both financially and in terms of our environmental responsibility. Now, here's a dirty word to some of you: market. Knowing your market. But we don't teach people about marketing for no reason at all. Understanding those who use our services, understanding what they need, is basically what marketing, knowing the market, is about. How well do we know that? How rigorous are we in finding out about that? What methods do we do that? Or do we just do it with a committee? I would suggest that committees are probably not the most accurate way of really understanding what our market is all about. What products will people need? Again, another dirty word. What products, what promises from us of delivery will they want? And I would suggest that in the future, the NREN will increasingly become an intelligent customer on behalf of that community we serve, the very diverse community, but they will look to the NREN to, on their behalf, go to the market and get services and resources that they need. Again, but who are our stakeholders? This is highly confusing. We're not a standard P&L commercial model. Who are our stakeholders? Who are the people that we have to respond to and often give a return to? People put money into us. They expect a return. How are we accountable for that return? Who are our colleagues? Who are the people we work with? This is something, again, somewhat unusual in other commercial areas. We have colleagues, we share. It's a culture. And somehow we want to stimulate that and enable that to happen in yet an ever more challenging world that we live in. Co-creators, another essential thing to the academic world, the fact that people can collaborate and together create. And yet in that sustainability, I'm beginning to ask questions about how much of this co-creation should be given away to the market. Should we be retaining some value? Traditionally, we've said it's open, it goes out there. But should we not be retaining some value in order to reinvest in this wonderful national and research educational network system we have around the world that is actually one of the drivers for creating the wealth that people are going and taking away? The knowledge economy, which will become more and more important, we're enabling it. Should we get some return to help sustain that economy? And then, of course, who are our customers? Who are the people who depend on us, who pay for our services or someone pays on their behalf? Do we really know who they are? Do we interact with them? Do we have an active interaction with them? And then disruption. Any talk has to mention the clouds. So the clouds, basically, whatever it's going to be, whatever it is, but it is something highly disruptive. And disruptive things often need new skills and new competencies in the organization. Are we ready to take those difficult decisions to change our organizations, to change the people, to change the way we work, in order that we can meet these responses to these disruptive technologies that come along and work in different ways? Are we prepared to do that, or will we just toil on making the best we can? I don't think just making the best we can is good enough for those we seek to serve. And having said that, I talk about a service culture. Again, something else we are seeking desperately to drive in Janet, to remember that we are there to serve people. It was interesting, I was reading in Marketing Week last night about Virgin Airlines. When the ash cloud happened over Iceland and Virgin had to cancel all their flights, many volunteers I note, from the finance director through to some of the other people in the back office services, were in taking telephone calls because they wanted to serve their customers. And Richard Branson said they didn't need to be asked because we seek to recruit the sort of people who will do that. Are we recruiting the sort of people who are passionate about serving our customers? Dave has mentioned this, very important, globalization. We have got to strengthen rather than weaken the relationships between the national and research education networks around the world, and we really have to be smart at that. Petty politics have no place in international networking, and I sit on my desk and I see emails go around and it almost makes me cry. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have is too precious to be messed around with politics. We need to really find ways of working better and making sure that that very special thing that we have in terms of this global economy is truly shared. And then finally, something else that has disappointed me greatly since I came to this sector, the speed at which we work. We really have, in just about all our activities, got to get faster. We are too slow. We're too slow at our decision making. And if we are to survive as NRENs into the future, one of the things we've got to be is really responsive quickly to our markets. Otherwise, we will get left behind, and believe it or not, someone else may come in and take our place. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Over to Jan Groenteraad from CESNET, known to all of you as the host of our conference.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, I would like to thank for the invitation to the panel. And frankly speaking, when I was thinking about my contribution, my take was that I will talk about what changes we should implement now in order there is a chance that NRN will be here in 10 years, because we are living in a very dynamic environment, and if we don't react in time, there is quite danger, as was already told, that somebody else would take our role. So what is probably going not to change in our environment, according to my view? So we believe that researchers will continue to demand for the most advanced and sophisticated services possible. And it's good for us that we have let's say, demanding customer, because I think these services will not be available on the commercial market at affordable prices. That's good for us because usually researchers transfer a huge amount of data, they do a huge amount of computation, and we believe that we can do it more cost effectively if we just tailor the services for them, that it would be affordable at the market. So there is challenge for NRN's community to drive innovation in some area of the society as a whole. As we all remember, in the beginning of, let's say, networking on internet, the university used to be the driving force of the innovation. But the world is changing now, and some big international companies are taking the lead in the direction of, let's say, research and innovation, but I still think there is a chance of NRN's community to stepping again and come with the innovation solution that will be, let's say, needed and introduced. And what changes, let's say, we have to introduce rather soon. So because the research will demand for so-called complete infrastructure services, not network only. They want, let's say, one-stop shopping for what they want, together with the support and all that comes with that. It was mentioned several times, there is a need for global virtual research community service, because the nature of the research is changing to the global environment, and we should address the need to increase international cooperation in order to be successful in fulfilling these global needs. What I see quite important that infrastructure environment should support increased cooperation between public and private researchers. That means we have to revisit our acceptable user policy and make such a cooperation possible, because according to my opinion, we have too many limitations. For example, in the area of future internet PPP, there are so many limitations that the cooperation between private and public sector is not working in such intensively as it should be. Another thing, according my opinion, is we need more visible categorization of the users with different approach. There is a famous, let's say, slide produced by C-Delight, categorize users for ABC, for more demanding BC, and I think the approach to the community should be different, because these very demanding users, we need much more user support, because they will use very sophisticated and complicated service. And in many areas, the primary, let's say, activity of these research is not ID. So they need to be IT people including in their teams in order to help them to do research. And we need much more focus in the education and support. That means we should even develop tools for support of these users, and it will be quite demanding NRN staff to be ready to the new role that is, let's say, in front of us. And we should prepare for increasing amount of managed data and geographically distributed data resources. So I think data will be quite a, let's say, issue in the future, and we should help researchers to handle with these, let's say, data. They are not only the technical issue, they are also security, legal, and data ownership issue. We have to develop and work in that field in order there are clear, let's say, way how to deal with these emerging huge amount of data that will be, let's say, produced by the research team. Another, according to my opinion, important area that NRNs are not active now is the support mobility of researcher, and with the increasing importance of wireless service. Usually in the countries, NRNs are running, let's say, fiber optics and, let's say, and with the Wi-Fi in the campuses. But these days, researchers require, let's say, connection to devices, let's say, anywhere. So we should get in touch with these operators and more closely help to enable the researchers to access their data, let's say, in order to support their mobility. So this is quite another challenging role for the NRNs. And according to my opinion, complete restructure of NRNs is needed, because current NRNs usually have been designed to run the network services. But we should be cooperative with the providers of other elements of infrastructure. That means the grids, clouds, supercomputers, storage, tools for cooperation. So we should completely restructure in order to be ready, provide for the research one-stop shopping. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Now I invite our colleague from Denmark, Martin Beck.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I've also been asked to speculate about how the future will look 10 years from now. And luckily, our Ministry of Science has spared me some of the thinking, because they have simply issued a report this April about how the future should look. And what they have done is that they look they look at the whole landscape of research infrastructure, and they have divided it into 6 categories. And we are down here at the last category, e-science. And what they want to do is simply to take cloud services, grids, scientific computing, storage, and so on, all the research, the e-infrastructure of the research world, want to combine that to one organization, one unified thing. So you could say that one vision of the future is that the NREN expands to do all that, or you could say that the NREN is dissolved into this unified new organization. So from a political perspective, that's clear. But what about if you look at it from the market perspective? I mean, there once was a time, when a university, standard university, would have its own wells and waterworks, its own electricity plants, and there are still in some countries, universities have their own laws and police force, but gradually, again, they adopt the services of society at large. And wouldn't that be the case in 10 years from now? Maybe network services are so proliferate and good and everything that we could just use the same as everyone else in society. Maybe so. But I think there will always be, as long as we have technical development, as we have a market which is moving ahead, there will always be a pointy tip to my figure up there, where there's infrastructure that enables infrastructure for which the market is not yet mature and which enables the kind of new research. Just like a bigger microscope, the one with the biggest microscope is the one that produces papers. Exactly the same, the one with the biggest infrastructure, at least for some kinds of research, are the ones that have success and earn the Nobel Prize. And I think there will be a need for exactly an infrastructure operator to be there in the future. And also because if everyone else is busy getting the Nobel Prize and doing good research, there's no one left whose sole focus is the operation of the infrastructure between the institutions and infrastructure at large anyhow. So I think there will be in the future an infrastructure operational organization for research and education, definitely. The question is just whether we call it the National Research Network or it's something else.
Thank you, Martin. Next, Thomas Brunner from the Swiss National Research Network, SWITCH.
Good afternoon. About 3 years ago, we at Switch started the process to develop a strategic perspective for our future. Of course, we did all these things we hear now from the several presentations and so on. And finally, the end of last year, we have now an agreed strategy for Switch for the year 2020. You say, what is really in 2020? You don't know what the future is. Yes, you are right. And of course, there is one small thing missing, and that is the glossy brochure defining all what are our strategic goal and why we come there. We didn't do that, and maybe we'll never do that. And of course, an important point of our strategy would be that we have some dynamic element in it. So we put the concept of an innovation engine in that concept. So we really want there have an ongoing process of getting new input from the users and then decide whether we can do that, can offer that or not can do that, and how it should be done. In that process, we also, of course, looked on our market and looked on the services and so on. And then we started also to think about how we should segment our groups of users or our roles. And we came up with that list. Of course, we have one thing that are the students, including the continuing education. Then we have the teaching staff in our users. We have researchers. We have the ICT service department, and we have the management of the universities. Now, as we have this defined strategy, we are thinking of how we should reorganize ourselves to really be successful in implementing our strategy. And currently, I'm in the process to propose to our board a new structure for Switch, which basically follows this user segmentation. So we will have, when you look at the second, we will have a department which is really responsible for the services to the ICT department at the universities. That, of course, will now be the biggest department we will have, because currently most of the services are really targeted to the ICT services departments. But we think for the future we definitely have also to have special services for the teachers, for the researchers. So we will have a new department just dedicated to that, another one for the students, and the fourth one here, that is for the non-core business. I think some of you know that we in Switzerland also are doing the registration for the .ch domains, so that the other user, that would be in this department. And now on the real left, I think we have the department relation management. That is the department which should be responsible for the management of the universities. There we will also have our innovation engine in there, and where we do the community working groups which are not specific to one of these departments. So that is one of the also horizontal work. So that is basically the centralized services to the outside, and of course to the very right we have the centralized services for internal, where we see the technical support and the commercial support. Now I want to explain what this new focus could have as an impact. I take one service there, which we did for the last 10 years, that is AII, the Authorization and Authentication Infrastructure. And that service, of course, that is fully targeted nowadays for the ICT service departments, because it's very organization-centric, and it's for their services how to authorize them. But we think of something new. Yeah? That's something we call e-identity for learners. That has the main targets really for the students, so they should be in the center, but on the other hand, it should also be something for the university management. What do we mean by that? It should really support the lifelong learning and foster the relationship between the students and the university after studies ended. So it could be for different organizations there. Of course, the content should be provided by the universities, for instance, degrees. It should be authorized content. The viability is under control of the student. For instance, towards other universities, he can control whether that this should be seen by a different university or not. And it should, in the end, be extensible towards social networks, for instance, LinkedIn. And last but not least, it should also be extensible toward other communities, for instance, potential employers. So this e-identity for learners will provide learners in the sense of lifelong learning with a unique electronic identifier and identification system, as well as further functionalities to manage qualifications acquired in education and further education beyond organizational boundaries, sometimes also called e-portfolio. So, summary, in short, our future strategic orientation is built on a different mindset. It needs a shift from service-based thinking to user-based thinking.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And now, last but not least, I give the floor to Claudio Locchio from the Italian Research Network, GAR.
Yes, welcome to everybody. When I was asked to talk about the future of the network in 20 years, I said, how can I guess what's going to happen in 20 years not being Berlin Wizard? And as I don't have his help, I try to guess from the errors we made in the past. So my next two slides will be the errors we made and the way we did wrong prediction in the last 20 years, and then we try to do it right in the correct way in the future. We also need to notice, of course, that GAR, as many of the other results network, as a strange business model because our users, our customers are also our owners. So we have the duty to do what they ask us. And very often they ask very strange things, and very often they don't know that they are our owner or not even that they are our users. So one of the big challenges we are going to do is to make sure that all our owners know that they own a company which is making services for them. As soon as they get aware of this, our life gets more complicated and our challenges get big because they are new ones and they get new ideas, even worse. So which were the errors we made 20 years ago? We started to make wires because we needed it. PTTs, like Carl said in the very beginning, we were doing telephony, we wanted to do data network. And we will continue to do that kind of stuff because we still believe that nobody will be able to provide this kind of networking at layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, the way we need, the way our users need. So we're still convinced that it's not going to disappear, it's going to become transparent. That's the difference between what it was before. And 20 years ago, services were something we didn't care at all. We give you the wire, you do whatever you want. They were doing email, whatever they wanted, but services were something for the users, and we were just a black box for the users. Don't touch the router, that's my business, you use it. Now it looks somehow very different, and it will look even more different, we believe, in the future. The users will get power on anything, including on the network itself, and many other things will change probably. I don't know if it is going to be true, but here is what happened 10 years ago. We did not predict it 20 years ago that the fiber were going to be anything more than the strange lamp that was sitting on the table in the 80s. That was the fiber in 1980s. That was it. 10 years later, the fibers were the basis to make a big revolution in the network, and the big effect of that was not predicted at all. And it also made a very strange and dangerous effect on the NRANs. We believed that dramatic and big changes would happen every 10 years. And it was not true. That was a big challenge. Something else happened, not in networking, but not as the fiber revolution came in through. Of course, the network was also different. We gave some more power to the user. We gave them a bit of control, but services were still something which we are not caring at all. We even shut down the only service which we were running, which was email gateway services, because we were all on SMTP and we didn't need services anymore. So the services department into GAR disappeared. No user services, we don't need it anymore. Here we are in 2011. We made something good in doing our prediction. Well, we can say that the highway is given for granted. It's not a dramatic change anyhow. If I go and look at the maps of 20 and 10 years before, well, I just have more wires, more fibers, more bandwidth, but not a dramatic change. I just get more, but that's it. And the users give it for granted. It must be like that. It is not a challenge. I want my gigabit to my desktop because my interface is 1 gigabit or more on my laptop. Why can't you deliver my gigabit to the other end of the world? That's the question we are getting from the networking point of view. And it's very dangerous, of course, also because we are giving gigabit power to all the other users. What are the other ones? Well, they're not the physicists, not the biologists, not the doctors anymore. There are any of them. And they want to have this connectivity anywhere where they are. We heard it before. They want to sit on the tram and continue to do what they were doing in the office while they go home. And this is what is being asked to the NRAN. We need to cope with this. But this is being asked today, now. So the last N has changed quite a lot, also because we are trying to network people and not only services. Another thing which we did not guess at all is that we would have been expected to do training. If I was mentioning we do training in the network as one of our services in year 2000, people would have shot at me and say, "You're stupid, you're not a university, you don't do training, you do services," maybe. Now we are delivering courses, and the last one we are delivering is the one, of course, about IPv6. You're going to die out of it. And surprise, surprise, it's an online service, of course, e-learning in all the possible ways. We got 957 subscribers, which every 2 weeks follow the course online. 957 means that there are much more of these guys than we were expecting. We were expecting about 100 people to follow the course. It means that a lot of people, which are not exactly the IT people, are following the course, and they're asking for it, and we get questions out of it, and we get suggestions. So we are becoming a training center. What will we be in 220? I don't know, but of course, one of the big things that we sit and decided is The big question will be network. What does network mean? Does it mean wires? No. We will have to deal with data and the way to access the data and to empower the users to make their science or their knowledge out of this data wherever the data are. So we are being asked to do services to make this possible at all to the users. We are going to network people, to bring communities together and make them able to do things. Network will still build about networking in the common sense innovation, wires, fibers, whatever it is, but it will be hidden because we need it. But nobody will give us publicity anymore. Nobody will make a paper about the fact that we made 1 million gigabit on our wires. That's not going to be the headlines. Something else is going to be the headlines. So users community will become the real owner of the network, and they will run probably the services themselves, but they need they need help from us to run the services. Trena motto is networking the networkers. The NREN's motto probably is going to be networking the researchers and the citizens as well, because they believe, the users now, that we are going to be the ones which build the society. We are going out in the open. Many of our colleagues believe that being somebody who deploys results networking does not need publicity. Now we end up in paper more and more, and one of the things that the NRN has started to do and will do more and more is to go out to the public and make public statement, not about the results network, but about the internet, about the services, and so on. The last week we just made a very strong statement on net neutrality because our users, our owners asked us, say, you have to do that kind of statement, otherwise we are not able to do our business anymore, to do research and so on. So we have to think quite a lot the way we bring collaboration between users in the services. So collaborating and collaboration tools are the real challenge that we have to face. Probably I'm wrong, I don't know, but probably all the tools that we consider modern now will look dumbly primitive in 10 years, and we don't know what's going to happen. But what we know is going to happen is that if we do network the people together, we still keep the value, and we probably survive in a totally different way. One of the things which I tried to analyze was the size of the services, of the user services department. Non-existent, 2 people, 5 people, 10 people now will be the all NREN, the services department in 10 years. Will we have a department in 10 years? I'm not sure at all. I probably don't have a department anymore in 10 years. Everybody would be able to do a little piece of a global work, which is making people collaborate and do research and outreach. So, well, the last question is how many nonsenses I've been saying in the last 5 minutes. Well, one of the things that the physicists normally do is go back and check. So we have the recording. I promise, if I'm still here, that in 10 years I will go back and check what I've said, and probably will laugh a lot about it. So I think now we open the discussion, and that's it.
Thank you, Claudio. Indeed, it's time to open the discussion. So I suppose we'll get some more light in the hall so that not only you can see us, but we can also see you. Because no matter what questions Anna and I will come up with, questions from the audience are clearly more important. So if you have a question or some statement you want to make, something you agree or disagree with, just raise your hand.
Everybody has mentioned the importance of innovation, and some people have mentioned also the importance of responding quickly to change. But all the networks pride themselves on running production services. So here are 2 rather different mindsets, at least traditionally they're rather different mindsets. How does the panel create the right balance? How do they marry these 2 different cultures?
Thank you for that question. That was David Foster from CERN. I think from a distance, who wants to go first?
Me?
Martin.
Okay. Even, it's right, there is a kind of conflict between daily operations and development. However, infrastructure of this kind we are providing is something special, and that's why you need a kind of development effort specifically targeted that And that's why I think we've had so good experience in the past with having more or less the same people that do the development are also those who do the operation, and there's at least a kind of fruitful exchange and not in separate companies, even though it from a managerial point of view or from an ITIL point of view would be simpler. It's simply not what the users want.
Dave?
Yeah, I guess I would make two comments. Number one, I think probably things have developed in a way that makes it a little easier to do from a technical perspective. I mean, as we've migrated from, sort of just providing layer 3 services to being able to provide layer 2 services, as we've seen entities like the Glyph develop that have focused and advanced, our work with fiber meshes. The great thing about that is that it gives us an extraordinary great deal more flexibility to roll up very specialized networks and at the same time to roll up networks that have real high level operating requirements. I think it's valuable. I think the more challenging part actually is how we build organizations that have the proper balance between the kind of people and leaders and folks who can do the advanced development work and who have can build relationships in our universities and with our research communities, and also then have the kind of people who can think about what we do like a business, who can focus on availability. Those are very, very different, and I think very, very different ways of thinking. And we tend to develop people in our industry and around our industry who are very good at one of those two things, but aren't very good at finding the middle ground. And I think our ability to survive as relatively, and in an organization the size of a Cisco, for instance, you can deal with this problem with mass. In our organizations, we can't deal with this problem with mass. And so I think we have to be very creative about that as we choose our organizational leaders, as we build our organizational structures, but probably more importantly, as we build the relationships and the nature of the relationships between our organizations, our universities, and our corporate partners and suppliers, that the answer to some of these issues really rests in how we find the right way of approaching that.
Tim?
Yes, very, very quickly. I think one area where NRENs do differ is the research and development end. Janet would certainly say it's rather more development than research. There's other places that tend to do more blue sky research, and we're not particularly funded to do that. As far as development goes, I do believe you can still put a certain discipline without taking the opportunity of missing something. Something I picked up in Hollywood was when we had to develop sitcoms. You had 10 sitcoms on a slate. You took 5 to have developed script and a synopsis of the series. You took 4 to production, and if you got got 1 network hit and 2 to syndication, your finance director was happy. He actually knew, he didn't care what was in them, he knew there was something that was going to come to fruition for the company. In the same way, I don't think all development needs to be totally throwing stuff at the wall. I think there can be some direction, and that's why I talked about marketing. The other thing is we put quite an emphasis, and it's challenging this, we've just had a false start, we're starting again, on product development. And I would underline what Dave has said, that a lot of our product development is working hand in hand with our commercial colleagues, because very often what they have on the shelf is not quite right, but there are ways of developing and changing it so that we can make it right for our community. We can then acquire it, package it up as a product, and get it to them at a reasonable price, a price that 140 different institutions all doing their own thing would never have got, and never got such a good product. So I don't actually see there is a tension between the two, but it's not straightforward.
Thank you. I think there was another question somewhere around there. Can we have a microphone there, please?
My name is Antonella Fresa. I come from Italy, and I come also from a different community of those who are in the majority in this room. I work for the Italian Ministry of Culture, and since a couple of years, we are trying to understand if and how the cultural sector can take benefit and exploit the power and the facilities that exist in the NRN and in the grid and in the other e-infrastructures. I should say that this work is rather difficult for us. So when I heard speaking about new user communities and how to approach new user communities, I can tell you that we really need, as new user communities, some help from your side. Because first of all, it is the e-infrastructure is not a one-stop shop, as it was mentioned in one of the presentation. So if the cultural sector wants to have a service, maybe at the European level, we have to discover who is doing what and in which kind of organization in each country we have to refer to. Because an example that everybody knows is that the grid and the connectivity is provided differently country by country. I come from Italy, and in Italy we have basically now hopefully two, but there are still more than two providers we have to deal with. And just talking with our partners in the UK, for example, which are collections trust, and they are operating the portals for culture, the people we are working with were rather uncomfortable in saying which kind of a relationship they have with Janet. So these just two examples speaking about the north and the south of Europe. Well, I don't have the answer clearly, but some of the ideas that I heard during this panel presentations were exciting. The one-stop shop, the e-identity, where there are no more only researchers but individuals who are interested in approaching the services from the e-infrastructures. And a final comment on the categories that I saw listed in the users, in the customers in Denmark, I think. The humanities are part, to me, to my understanding and to my mind, of the e-science. It is another kind of science, but even the humanities should be considered a part of the e-science.
Okay, just to clarify, there, of course, every kind of research infrastructure, again, is dependent on the research networks. So it was what you saw in the categories, there were funding for other kinds of infrastructures like research vessels or microscopes or databases or stuff which is not a part of our normal internet service provision here. So that's it. But apart from that, humanities are very welcome, and we would love to do more infrastructure for your kind. I think that goes for the whole panel.
Well, may I? Yes, of course, because this kind of community is one of the communities that we started to approach many years ago. But the feeling that we need to do more to get the right synergy between the two and in touch between the two is, of course, something which is one of the biggest challenges that we have to face now. We call it, from the NRN perspective, the problem of outreaching our users and making them aware that we are there also to serve them, and we can give them tools which are they able to use it or not. Whenever we have to publicize an event we are going to do, we always start to scratch our head and say, how do we get out to that community in a way that they know that we are there? And very often the strategies that we have to follow are very strange and very diverse. Very often we reach them by publishing something on the newspapers or getting on the news, and somebody comes back and, hey, I read this in this news, do you do this one? Is it for me? Of course, you are one of my customers, come. But that's still a very big gap which is existing. We have been built as the technologists, the one who make the network work, and we were stopping at the end router, entering into the IT department of the university. Going out of it and reaching the desk of somebody who is doing something, especially if he's doing humanities, medical science, or whatever it is the bigger challenge that we have to do in the next 10 years. We have been trying already since more than 10 years, at least in GAR. And we got some little success, but little. And we need to do more. And of course, we try to make it a global community because, of course, when I talk to Antonella, because she's one of my possible customers, she tells me I want to talk to somebody in Denmark and somebody else in Norway, somebody else in Ireland. And then I cannot answer like I have to do now. Well, then you have to go this way, that way, and talk to 5 different people. Trena is here also to help this kind of stuff. We have been trying it, and the BOF, which is tonight, will try to bring together more people in a way that we can bridge this kind of gap. But it's an important problem, and thanks for pointing it out. Outreaching the real user and telling them you are our owner and customers and we can do something is a problem, and I agree.
Yes, as you recognise, Janet is connected to a lot of libraries, but a lot of museums as well. Principally, I'll just run through the museums. One of the biggest uses, actually, that's come from the museums is all the schools people who are connected to us. Many of the schools join in on interactive experiences with the museums. This has also benefited the museums because they're counting that now almost as footfall for the people coming into them. But it's a real educational experience. They're providing really good learning experiences by video conferencing on particular subjects that fit into the curriculum. So that's one way that the museums are using connectivity. Libraries, it's a hot topic at the moment because we've got one of our ministers in government is very keen on driving libraries and Wi-Fi in libraries particularly. The interesting opportunity there is we're helping them do that because many libraries are connected to Janet through the local authorities. And one of the things we can ride on in the back there, while Wi-Fi can be made legitimately available to citizens if they sign a piece of paper, we can also put EduRoam into the libraries, which means that students and people who have EduRoam can come into the libraries. So again, this pervasive learning is working very well outside the campus. Going to the future, cultural opportunity for Janet is one of the cultural ministers is very keen on establishing new local television and news. They've already recognized there is only one existing network that could easily help them do that. There's also another spin-off in that, which I've suggested to them, and they suddenly realized, why not get universities involved? Because then there's a virtuous circle of students developing their media skills on real television as opposed to pretend television. So many, many benefits if you explore these things. Of course, sometimes you will have to say no, but I like to say yes when I can.
Dave.
Let me just make 2 or 3 quick comments. This community, I think broadly, has had the sense that our ability to engage with the humanities, and I'll speak to the humanities directly, is a real goal. And I think across all of these organizations, we've committed staff to this. Internet 2 commits staff to this. We reach out to folks. But let me push back at you just a second in your community. We're in a domain here where what we try to do in our organizations is really advanced internet development. Is really figuring out where that next thing is going to be. And as we engage with academic communities, we have some capacity to come reach you where your community is. But actually, we have limited capacity often to do that. And so I think one of the things that's important for all of you as leaders in the humanities and the social sciences is that you also need to begin to focus on how you, use this word lightly, reform your own community. And you've got to, I think, if you're going to engage, you've got to start attracting more students with math and science backgrounds, who aren't afraid of the technology. You've got to try to begin to get people who come into, many people who are attracted to the arts and social sciences because they're repelled from things, from science and technology, represents a sort of a stratification of our communities that is unhealthy for us. And so I think, And so I think it's important that you also think about how your own community is prepared to engage with us. And also, you've got, in the humanities in particular, in the arts, you've got this extraordinary commercial development in advanced digital media happening right now. That is something that I think is increasingly coming to represent orders of magnitude more investment sometimes. You look at what goes into making a movie. You could build you could build a super collider for what one blockbuster costs. These people are spending enormous amounts of money. They have a commercial marketplace. What I've not seen very many examples of is where the humanists and the arts communities in the colleges and universities are reaching out and building relationships with the commercial sector that is investing, billions of dollars in building advanced digital capabilities that are really built to be excellent platforms for the arts and humanities. And I think the more, as your community, you can go out and engage the Disneys and the big media companies, the better the probability you have of accumulating some capital investment assets that will have the people at this table get very interested in coming to work with you.
I see a question in the middle, Florencio Utreras.
Yeah, Florencio Utreras from Clara. I was going to emphasize something that Claudio said. We have been very good in the last 15, 20 years in deploying networks, so transferring packets from one side to another, and without having the user to ask us, I want this packet to be transferred to Bologna or to Russia or to the United States. Instead, in services like video conferences that you mentioned, we have not been very good at. We see every time in every conference a new experimental service, high quality, 3D, whatever. And we are not able to produce a service that is global. You mentioned several countries in Europe. I can mention several experiments where we have people in Latin America trying to talk to people around the world, and we have to do the same work that you are doing by hand, calling people, exchanging lots of emails. So this system just doesn't scale. We have to find a way to produce global services. And that is the challenge, I think, for the future. That is a big challenge because we are not used to that. We don't have protocols for that. We have to create directories, a lot of things like that, and maybe brand names for those services. So we have to be working on that because otherwise our users are not going to feel that any of our services are global. I mean, people are talking globally now, so we cannot just deploy one service in one country. We have to go globally.
Claudio?
Yeah, and I must say that that's one of the biggest challenges that this kind of application services still has got. We decided, for example, for video conferencing that it is a service because we are compelled to give it as a service because the Ministry of Health told us it is a service that we are going to use. And this is a service we are going to use for research, and we are also going to use it for doing our meetings and so on, so it must work, full stop. And given the fact that the guy saying that was the ministry himself, and he is one of the users of the video conferencing services, we sat down and made it a national service which has got support and blah, blah, blah. And so it must work, because if it does not work, the ministry will ring me directly and start shouting and give out all the money he's giving us to make the service. And it's a lot of money. Little nuts for them, but it's a lot of money for the NREN. On the other hand, it's perfectly true that whenever they need to talk to somebody in Chile or in Russia, we are in a nightmare. We are trying to approach this kind of global services in yet another time, hopefully via Gen3 with EduConf. I hope we finally solve it, but it's a way that it's a typical service that must become global, and that knowledge must be transferred from one education institution to the others. Of course, one of the ideas that Martin was presenting this morning, why don't we share these services? Yes, but if I give my services, which is up to production level, to somebody in Denmark, and they call me in Danish, my help desk will have some trouble in answering that. So we need to localize global services in a way that users can use it. I cannot answer in English. Probably the guy in Denmark does not speak English well enough to tell me what the problem is having. So this is another challenge that we need to do.
Can I just simply say, I think that is a very good example of something we all know we need. I doubt whether there's anyone in the room that disagrees we need it. How long is it going to take? Well, maybe we need new vehicles to develop these products and services, and maybe our colleagues in the commercial sector can help us. There's a wonderful opportunity here, you've heard it. Everyone wants an international exchange. Can you help us?
Okay, we'll leave that challenge for later. Other comments? Other question from the room? I see Klaas Wieringa. He has already a microphone, so he goes first.
Yeah, I hold the token. Klaas Wieringa, Cisco. Looking at the panel, I cannot help thinking that, apart from Anna, of course, these are all gentlemen of a certain age. And well-deserved. Isn't it, since most of you have been talking about we need to rethink about how we do business as an NREN. Perhaps the network, we should regard it as just an enabler. Well, if I look at the panel, I would guess that about this is my 14th or 15th TNC, so I'm also one of the old farts by now, I guess. So I'm allowed to say this. About half of you would have been here 10 years ago in the same panel as well. So my question really is, how do we make sure that those under 40-year-olds really participate in developing the NREN of the future?
Okay, we'll take that question, not asking. I don't know if I now have to start with the oldest or the youngest panelist. So I just start at the end of the table with Thomas and then work my way here. What can you say to this, Thomas? Thank you.
I think definitely that is not really a problem for all of us. I think we just don't have people of my age. We have also a lot of younger people in our organization, and they have a saying, definitely, I can assure you.
Jan?
If I can comment, let's say, in Cessna as well, we are doing every year the analysis of the age structure of our staff. I believe you that I happen to be the third oldest, but the great majority of our colleagues are, let's say, in the age less than 35, and believe that in an environment there is always, let's say, democracy environment, and people have to, even we are talking about new strategy and about the future evolution, we of course invite all the people to contribute, and not only the man with the gray hair.
Tim, you're also a Democrat?
No, I don't think it's anything to do with age at all. We've got people in our company who are under 30 who are old farts. What it's about, in my view, it's about we need to have ways in which people can change, can come in and out of our sector. There are far too many, in my view, people who've been in the sector too long, and that doesn't mean they couldn't go out and come in, but I do find that there's a lack of lateral thinking, there's a lack of outside experience, and to me that's what makes it slow. We had a bright person join us not too long ago, and someone said, well, I don't know why you want to get him, he'd be off in 3 years. I said, hallelujah. We want more people who are going to come in and go out and are going to change around. And if we could get some processes in our HR that mean some of our people can go into industry for 3 years and come back, I think that's what it's about. I don't think it's anything to do with age. We do need more women, of course, as well. One of the big things that we do lack. Terrible, these conferences. I mean, the same in the UK. Where are the women who are doing engineering, who are doing, who are doing network engineering, that sort of thing? Something wrong there.
Martin?
Yeah, well, of course, if you look at it just from the outside perspective, this research networking, like many other areas of society, are populated on management level by old elephants, okay? running around in the circus and as they've done in many years. But the important thing here, I think, is the ecosystem around our organizations, because most of a successful NREN, I would say, is not just an operational unit or not just a development unit, but has an ecosystem where you reach out to users and include them and let them go if you have to, and come back and so on, and also an ecosystem where you exchange ideas and services and knowledge with the other NRENs. I would say if we hadn't had that, it would have been difficult, at least for a small NREN like ours, to exist.
Dave is the one who came into his current position most recently from all of us.
Well, I'm probably the combination of the oldest person and the one who came into this position most recently. So you know, and wasn't exactly how I intended to spend this part of my career. I think the problem's really serious, actually. You know, I like Tim's suggestion that you know, we have to, that our key to fixing this problem is to make this a less closed community. And I think that has, you know, that's a two-way door. I think that means that we have to, you know, have a more welcoming environment to bring people into our community, and we have to insist that when somebody's focus and contribution to a particular instance or project has waned, that it's time for them to maybe go on and do something else. That as organizations we have to learn how to manage that kind of dynamic organization. And I think probably we're just now beginning to get to the point where we're actually seeing what I guess I would call you know, a more professional layer of management start to develop in NRENs. I mean, we're not very old institutions here. I mean, we're somewhere between, you know, all of us, I expect somewhere between 15 and 25 years old as organizations. We're working in a business that is almost even newer than we are and is renewing itself on a daily basis. And you know, and I think you know, virtually, I don't believe there's probably anybody on this panel, and I doubt if there's anybody in the room who you know, early, you know, when you were in elementary school, or when you were in high school or the next level up, or even in college, said, boy, my career aspiration is to go be part of an NREN. I mean, these are new things, and so we're learning as we go along here, and I think we have to commit ourselves to getting better in this. I'll just make one other comment that I think is relevant here. And I think we have the same problem, you know, at our universities with technology leadership, with CIO leadership. And that is, I think that a lot of the decisions we've made and a lot of the situation we're in right now, these jobs are really hard. I mean, when you commit from a career perspective to take on a campus-based senior IT leadership position, or you commit to maintain and sustain and develop in organizations like the ones that we're responsible for, you know, that is not for the lighthearted. You know, it is. You know, I suspect very few people at this table haven't spent at least 2 or 3 hours every day of their lives for the last 15 years, at least answering emails. That's when they're supposed to be on vacation, when they're supposed to be spending time with their families. And, you know, I know that a lot of that is because of the level of commitment that we have here. I don't think we can expect that as we mature our organizations, you know, that we can always run our organizations and our business and things we do on adrenaline. I think we're going to have to build mature organizations that have career paths for people, that recruit people in, that put opportunities out there, that begin to attract people when they're earlier in the development careers. It is a serious problem, and I think it's right to bring this issue up, and I think it's a challenge that we all really need to stay focused on.
Claudio?
Well, what Klaus said was exactly one of the topics that took us 2 years ago, a full day meeting of the senior staff management of GAR, saying we are all getting old, we are all getting gray hairs. I don't paint my own, but that's genetics. But I would have gray hair if I did not this lucky stuff.
Let's be careful about hair.
Yeah, but we were very worried because we are saying we are all over 50. Where are the young ones? Luckily, what happened that we still recruit people, because naturally it's happening that people are getting in and out. we roughly have about 1 or 2 people which get in every year and 1 or 2 people which goes out every year. Hopelessly, very often the ones which goes out are the ones which I want to keep. But that's happened, that's business. If they're very good, they can be attracted by somebody other places because they get a better salary, or they want new opportunities, they get fed up of dealing with the users, whatever it is. What makes me think that we are lucky is that now we are in the position that the digitally native people are approaching us as possible staff. It is happening since a couple of years already, but last year it always happened. Before, it was people which started to use computing and IT technology at school. Now the last ones which are coming to make, to talk to us, to get a job, to get hired and so on, and even to talk to us to make projects, have born with digital stuff around them. It's natural, and they think it in a different way. So they are a challenge to us because we don't understand them in the beginning. When they start to talk to us, they give something for granted, which for us was a challenge which took us 10 years to build. But for them to be in the middle of the street and be able to communicate, send messages, read email, and chat over a video with their fiancé is normal. That was not normal for me. I would have never talked about it. And for them, innovation is something which is normality, and new ideas are something which they try to invent every day. So luckily what we decided to do, for example, is we start to give out study grants to these people. So they get the ability to work with us. They're happy because they don't work for nothing. They get little money to do that, but they bring in new ideas. And we can start to exchange ideas with the older ones. Very often the most difficult and challenging thing that we have to face is to convince these guys, wait a minute, I'm not your father. So you tell me what you think, whatever nonsense you think it is. Because you can get a very brilliant idea, don't be scared of doing it. But many of them very soon do it. The last one which made a colloquium with me started to say, in Italy we have 2 ways of talking to people, the formal one and the informal one. The first question you ask me, may I be informal with you? Of course, yes, let's go on. And the second one was, do you believe that the fact that I have a lot of piercing is something which is against my position to being hired from here? No, go ahead. Now, I've been doing this, blah, 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 blah. We hire them. And this is something which made me hopeful that it is not going to be a gap. It has been a gap in between. There will be a gap between the 50s ones and the 20s one. In the middle, there is some kind of vacuum, which worries me a little bit. So probably we skip this generation and we bring the 20s up. The problem is with the 20s is that they don't have the experience to manage a company or an association or whatever it is. But they can learn better, and probably they have different ideas and manage much better than we do. I never did a school of management. I had to invent it. They have their ideas of management in society. Let's see what happens. I don't know.
Okay, as the youngest person in this panel, and I suppose the only female here. So a quick question then, how many people in the audience, respectfully, I ask this question of course, are under the age of 40? And leave your hand, okay, and leave your hand up if you are in a position that's a management position, or you're directing or positioning strategic direction for your organization. Okay, and then leave your hand open if you're not a male. Just two.
Somebody in the middle of the room got the microphone, so please go ahead.
So Hugh Cartwright from Imtech. Most countries have separate national networks for...
I'm sorry, it's very difficult to hear you.
Okay, is that better? Is that any better? So most countries have separate national networks for education.
Try to hold it like that. Shout into it.
So most countries have separate national networks for health, education, government, and other functions. Do you believe these will or should merge into one joined up public sector network? Will economic pressures maybe force them to do that? And what do you see the role of the NRENs in any such merger?
Very good question. Maybe I should start with Martin, because I know from some time ago that he did quite a study about it.
Yes, actually we tried consolidating some of these networks on a voluntary basis, but I think the only thing that will make things move is that probably we will have an all-inclusive public administration network in the future, because they have the power to decide that, whereas NRENs will always be different, except I hope that the NRENs will be so open and so easy to plug into that even public administration and healthcare and so on also can use their services just as they are. So I don't see it converging completely public networks, but I hope research networks can be used just as well for the relevant institutions.
Anybody else? How's that in the United States?
Well, I go I go first. Well, this is a kind of question which goes back to service level agreement and all this kind of nasty commercial stuffs. Whenever we do a results network, normally we say we can't guarantee anything on it. It's like Skype, no emergency call on Skype. You can call freely the world, but if you have to call the police or the firemen, don't rely on it. And this has been the philosophy of the NRENs for many years. You cannot do anything which is life-saving, dependent on the network, which is best effort, where nobody is there at midnight on Saturday evening to do something if something is wrong. But what has been happening is that we have been attracting, for example, in Italy, that's typically the case, the health services for research part of it. And the more they came into the game of playing over the network, the more they were asking. And now all the research hospitals have got a double fiber connections which connect them. So in theory, they will never go offline, even if there is nobody in the network operations center at midnight on Saturday, because one of the two links probably is up and running. We still tell them you cannot do anything which is life dependent of the patient on our network because we can't guarantee. But they started to do things like, but can we use your network to connect to the families so the family can talk to the doctor a way or another and they can get some consultancy? Yes, it's an experiment. But it is slowly drifting toward the fact that people will believe that we are a service also for this kind of stuff. We don't guarantee anything, but we move into the business. So it's happening a way or another. For public administration, it is what was I was trying to mention before. The way that we believe the network is going to be transparent in 10 years means that you don't care which is the carrier. You might be on the NREN or on a public administration or, in case it works, on a commercial provider, and you keep your connectivity and identity. What we already started to do is to go beyond to public administration and say, can we share services? EduRoam is a typical example. We are trying to carry EduRoam anywhere, in the libraries and in the squares and in the parks, and many others are doing.
Okay, Dave?
Well, when I made a comment about our what we call our US UCAN project, or our US Unified Community Anchor Network project, and the essential premise of the funding that we got from the federal government is to move our network and services infrastructure into this other, what we would call public service sets of communities. The decision by the federal government to respond to us in doing that was driven, I think, probably by a connectivity concern by many people in the community. That is, many of those agencies were not being particularly well served in the commercial marketplace where they didn't really have the expertise to acquire the right services, where the service models were purely bandwidth sensitive and therefore discouraged the kind of innovative applications that we do in our environment. And so we currently in our, in Internet 2, we estimate, this is hard to estimate, that we have approximately 60,000 of these organizations connected to our national and regional network infrastructure. This is about 60,000 out of a rough estimate of 200,000 such entities, all libraries, local government, state and local governments, public, healthcare clinics and the like. And so very carefully now we're moving into this space, but we're actually not intending to use the Internet 2 sort of brand to do that. We're intending to create another sort of wholly owned organization that we call US UCAN, which will have a different kind of sort of advisory structure. It is meant to bring other people in. What we have, I think, the conclusion that we've come to so far as we've tackled this is that the network piece will turn out to be relatively easy. It's not necessarily so now given the nature of our network, but with the new network capacity coming from fiber-based, owned fiber network infrastructures in the U.S., we have enormous amount of flexibility to provide different kinds of services to different communities. The real challenge is the readiness of these communities to participate in the process of collaborative engagement around the applications that are important in these communities. The thing is, in the ecosystem, you've got vendors up here and you've got these public service agencies down here, and all of the traffic is in between the suppliers and the and the public sector agencies. That was not the success model that we used in our community. The success model we used in our community was we engage our whole community together, we build application development capability, we build common communities, and then we go out to the commercial world and we build the kind of relationships that we need to have. So our goal in US UCAN is to replicate what we've been able to do in our community, and that has to actually start first with organizing these communities. And as we organize these communities, our hope and our plan is that they will become users at sort of the backbone level of the services that we provide on the same network infrastructure that we provide the R&E services.
Thank you. We actually have run out of time, but are there any comments from the other wing of the panel on this particular point? Jan?
Yes, I think that at least in the case of CESNET, we are ready to go to, let's say, service level agreement, because our network is in a status to offer very reliable services with the redundant connections. Our, let's say, NOC is 7x24, but I see another issue. When we try to approach, let's say, some government offices and even healthcare offering services, then came for complaint for the internet service provider and in the business sector in general that we are taking part of the, let's say, business, and let's say that's why usually we have to step down, because CESNET networks is according to license, it's the private network with the strictly, let's say, defined user community. Of course, this definition of the community is quite a gray area, but we must be very careful who to serve in order, let's say, not to get danger our funding from the government. So I think it's not only the technical issue, but it's the issues of, let's say, the competition or, let's say, legal in the country. What will be the, let's say, chance of merging, let's say, network from various sectors to one, let's say, network?
Thomas, you wanted to add something? No? Well, we are actually already 10 minutes past the time that this session was supposed to end, so I'm very sorry for those of you who had more questions, but we have to finish here. I thank you all for attending, and I like to ask you to join me in thanking our panelists for their contributions. Some practical announcements. We now have a coffee break. There will be demonstrations during the break in the Tycho and the Zenith room. In this particular coffee break, also the people who have entered posters in the posters session in the hall will be near their posters to give explanations, so please visit them. And this evening there are a large number of BOFs and other meetings. Please see the schedule where you would like to go in the evening. Thank you very much.